in Tehran, Iran, with no off-ramp, there's that word off-ramp again, in sight or even part of discussions. What will NATO do when this conflict ends? And we all know how it will end. We know Western politicians are a hardy bunch. Interesting phrase there, a hardy bunch. But there must be some repercussions, don't you think?
There will be repercussions. We've already seen, Western politicians tumble one by one as the economy of Europe worsens. More political pressure will be placed on these politicians. I think Jan Stoltenberg at the Vilnius summit put forward a very expansive view of what NATO should be, could be. I don't think anybody believes at this moment that NATO can afford to pay for that model. Germany's already started to walk away from its promise of €100 billion new army. They don't have an industry, they don't have money. They're saying, well, we're not going to be able to make that goal. France just signed a very ambitious military expansion program. I'd like to see how they're going to pay for that, especially now that there's so much unrest in the streets over pension reforms and things of that nature. I think NATO has basically stopped being able to afford itself, and it's going to have to look at different alternatives. And I think one of the clearest alternatives, one that Emmanuel Macron himself gives voice to on occasion, which is a new European security framework. That's the language that Russia uses as well. And I think you're going to see that the off-ramp is that Europe and Russia are going to find common ground on the necessity of a new European security framework that does not have America dictating outcomes, one that respects the legitimate national security interests of Western Europe and of Russia, and one that promotes the concept of, peaceful coexistence. And I think that's the outcome, but it's an outcome that can only occur once Russia wins. And NATO has to wake up one morning, dealing with the reality of a Russian victory, not just the possibility of a Russian victory.
All right, this is our final question submitted in advance. And for those of you who would like your questions to be considered for our next episode, you can go to scottritter.us and you will see exactly how you can do it, either in text form or a voicemail message. And after this one, we'll take some of the live questions coming in from folks who are watching on our various social media channels. I think that's what the kids call them. We're on the World Wide Web, even Twitch, with the gamers. Jean Doe in Western Europe. If the U.S. hasn't won a war in decades, why does it keep getting involved in conflicts? Can it be that to lose a war is more profitable than to win one?
This is a theme that a lot of people put out there about the profitability of war, etc. A war itself is not very profitable. It does a lot of damage to a nation's economy, etc. It's the build-up to a war where the profit is made, where it's the promotion of war minus the war is where profits are made. But war itself just chews through resources, and it leads to an artificial skewing of the economy that's not sustainable in peacetime. And I can just, first of all, I was involved in a war that we won. So, it's tough for me to to talk about losing a war because I haven't. But others have. But we didn't lose them militarily. We lost them politically. We lost the will to continue. It's not as though the Taliban beat us on the battlefield. The Taliban prevailed on the battlefield by outweighting us, outlasting us, making sure that we are the ones that lost the domestic political will to continue the fight. The Taliban never quit. The same thing in Iraq. It's not as though the insurgents beat us. ISIS didn't beat us. Nobody beats us. We beat ourselves. So we don't go into wars to lose. I can just tell you that there's not a military man alive that says, yeah, that's what I do. I go to war to lose.
But I thought that he was referring to weapons manufacturers. I mean, win or lose, the people who are selling weapons make money. Isn't that what the questioner meant?
No, he's talking about profitable for a nation, that the nation goes to war. First of all, weapons manufacturers don't send us to war. Can it be to lose a war is more?
Well, we don't really know. He didn't really say that in that second question there. He doesn't say profitable.
He doesn't even mention weapons manufacturers. He says the U.S. hasn't won a war in a decade. Why does the U.S., keep getting involved in conflicts? Therefore, we assume that it is the unspoken subject of the next sentence. Can it be that to lose a war is more profitable than the win one? Goes back to the U.S. There's no mention of military-industrial complex.
Yeah, well, you're acting like you're his editor. Maybe he's not the world's greatest writer. I just think that may be what he meant.
But even then, I disagree. But the maximum profitability for a defense contractor is in the lead up to war, not in the war itself. Mm-hmm. And again, defense contractors don't make policy. Just simply don't. They don't have that power. They make money. That's what they're there to, but they don't make policy. And we don't go to war because a defense contractor says we have to go to war. That has never happened, ever. There's a lot of people out there with their conspiracy theories about this. That's not how it works. Raytheon is not at the in the White House Situation Room when decisions are made to use force. Raytheon is an outside consultant that's brought in beforehand to talk about building weapon systems, and afterhand, to talk about expansion of manufacturing capacity. But a decision to go to war is made on a national security basis that has nothing to do with the profitability of defense contractors. It might have something to do with the profitability of the nation, but not that. We go to war to win wars. Plain and simple. No one will ever be able to convince me that a president of the United States made the decision to deploy American troops for the purpose of losing so that we could make money. That never happened.
Enough said.
All right, let's take some questions coming in live on our various social media channels. One thing I would like to know is the true casualty numbers. This is from Beast Mode, who's watching on Twitch. All Western media says Russia has sustained more, while Scott and McGregor say 300,000 plus for Ukraine. That seems way too high.
Well, Beast Mode, I've already talked about this. I've spoken in depth on numerous occasions. I've written articles about it, about my experience in working the Janus supercomputer and simulating the Marine assault breach operations against the Iraqi defensive lines, and what went into that, and the various calculations, probability kill factors, force structures, etc. I've already talked about this. I talked about how I approached this, and I am 100% confident in my methodology, and I'm very confident in the outcome. If you don't agree with me, that's your business. I'm not here to convince you. I told you how I do it. If you think it's way too high, what's your methodology?
Scotty's on fire.
VTXT 1104. What happened to the nukes that were stationed in Ukraine when, I don't know what that's supposed to say, when the USSR split up? That's not good grammar, but maybe you can figure out what the question is.
Well, ultimately, the nukes were returned to Russia. The Ukrainian government knew from the very start that it wasn't going to keep nuclear weapons. There's a lot of talk here about, I think it's the Budapest Memorandum, 1994, that basically Ukraine said, we'll give up our nuclear weapons, but in return, we get these assurances. That ain't what happened, people. Stop reading Wikipedia. Do your own research. What happened is the Ukrainians knew from day one that they weren't going to be allowed to retain this. Why? Because they didn't have control of them. The strategic nukes were under control of the Russians. And the Russians basically told the Ukrainians, if you make a move towards these nukes, we'll take you out. because you aren't going to have nuclear weapons. Every one of these nukes, that the strategic ones are under Russian control. There were other tactical nukes, but all the PAL devices, the safety devices, the codes and everything were in Russian control. The Ukrainians never once had access to a viable nuclear device. All of the nuclear weapons were under control of a special KGB directorate that responded to Moscow, not to Kiev. And so they knew they were going to have to give them up. And they were looking for ways. What they found out is that there was money to be made here. And so they extorted Russia, they extorted the West to get money. That's it. If you look at the negotiating history of this memorandum, it's all about Ukrainian extortion. That's it. They extorted the world to get money, to get debts paid off, to get the Russians to give them more money. And then they gave up the weapons, which they were going to give up no matter what. That's what happened to the nukes.
Ann Moss handling the backstage duties tonight, most ably as always. Thank you, Ann, for your good work. Next question comes from Mother Goose 3 on Rumble. What is your take on events taking place in Syria? Is the escalation taking place there an effort to force Russia to focus on multiple fronts?
Russia's a nation that can walk and chew gum. It's not like they can't maintain a military presence in Syria independent of what's going on in Ukraine. The Russians have sufficient military force in Syria to do the military tasks that they've been assigned. I think what's going on in Syria isn't so much that the West is trying to put pressure on Russia, but it's Syria and Russia putting pressure on the West. The idea is to get the United States to be overstretched, and it is the United States that's overstretched. It's very difficult to sustain the American military presence in Syria. In order to do that, we have to have a viable military presence in Erbil in northern Kurdistan, in Iraq, and then that is sustained through a lengthy line of communication with Kuwait, and Kuwait is sustained by an active air and sea lift in there. So it's a very long and cumbersome communication channel. Then a similar one goes through western Iraq up to Tamf, which is a border town that the United States has put an enclave in, and the Russians in particular are trying to get the United States to back away from Tamf because the Russians don't like the idea of American air power operating over Tamf. Very short, time of flight to targets that the Russians would prefer the United States not being in a position to attack. And so the Russians are starting to put the squeeze on that. You saw that the other day when an American MQ-9 drone was flying out of Tamf, and it heading in a direction the Russians weren't comfortable with, and a Russian fighter came in and dropped flares in front of it, forcing the MQ-9 to change course. And I think you're seeing more aggressive flying on the part of the Russians against Americans who are pressing their luck, flying into areas that they shouldn't be flying in. Now, remember, the United States has no legal authority to operate in Syria. Syria is a sovereign state. The Syrian government has not invited the United States to operate on its territory. So, the American aircraft that are operating there, the American troops on the ground, are there in violation of international law. Russia, on the other hand, has been invited by the Syrian government. They're there legally, and they are authorized by the Syrian government to carry out operations that are conducive to the sovereignty of Syria, and putting pressure on the United States to, leave its illegal operation in Syria is something that both the Syrians and the Russians are trying to do.
Crypto AG on Twitch. If there's any time at the end, please can you ask Scott if he has the video of a tank opening up at point blank on a group of soldiers that thought it was friendly, and is it real? Nope, sorry, there's not enough time. No, just kidding.
I mean, there was a video early on in the conflict, in the early stages of the war, that had a bunch of Ukrainian personnel, including some women, who were posing and taking selfies by a Ukrainian tank. And in the distance, a tank approaches, and they just assumed that it was one of theirs. So they're still there doing their thing, and they're all clustered together. And as the tank approaches, it fires off a round, and it just eviscerates them. I've seen that video. I don't know if that's the one he's talking about, but it's a real video.
Okay. What else do we have, Ann? Angel Firstly, a regular, a prolific commenter. A question for Mr. Ritter. That would be you, Scott. The West keeps claiming about a new counteroffensive by Ukraine. But how? Where will Ukraine get the military personnel from? Consider their losses. Do you think that the countries that took in Ukraine refugees will be forced to send them back to Ukraine to fight this war, as Zelensky is demanding these countries do? Thank you, sir.
Well, we know that the Ukrainians are in the process of a new round of mobilization, and this mobilization appears to include 16-year-old boys and 60-plus-year-old men. There's some reports that say that in Germany, a 71-year-old Ukrainian showed up for training at the German Kaserne. Ukrainians are also starting the process of mobilizing women with specific medical skills, so they would become the personnel that would be evacuating wounded from the front. Very dangerous job. But this is it. Now, then, there are, in Poland, there's reports of, some 80,000 men of military age, Ukrainian men in Poland, who fled Ukraine when the war started. And some believe that the number is much larger than 80,000, and that's a lot of guys. Is Poland going to go and forcibly evict these people? I think that's asking for too much, but I think what will happen is that these people, if they have law enforcement contact, a speeding ticket, stopped for drunk and disorderly, and the law enforcement finds out that they're Ukrainians who are there and they don't meet one of the, there's several exceptions to it. Single fathers, a father with 3 or more children, somebody who works as a driver for the delivery of humanitarian goods, things like this. If you don't meet one of these criterion and you get stopped by by Polish law enforcement, I think they will probably return you to Ukrainian authorities. The other thing I think will happen too is that there will be a black market for these waivers, for these exemptions too. Now that Ukraine's looking to get these guys out, Poland is sitting there, and if I were a corrupt Polish official, I'd be in the business of handing out documentation that prevented me from being returned to Ukraine. So I don't think Ukraine's going to get very many people being returned to them from that source. I think this is a political move on the part of Ukraine to make it clear that they aren't going to tolerate these people running away from their military service any longer.
Mark Kessler is watching on Facebook, and he wants to know, what are your thoughts regarding conscripting Ukrainian women for duty?
Well, again, what the Ukrainian government has done is said that women who have specific medical skills are going to be subject to conscription because they need these medical skills to deal with the increase in casualties, etc. But
but not combat. That's limited to medical.
Yeah, it's not like they're recruiting women. They're going to say, okay, now you go to the front line to serve in combat. They'll go to the front line to serve in combat as evacuators, meaning that as casualties occur, these people will go forward, stabilize the casualty, and then transport them out. And they'll be subject to, they'll be exposed to Russian fire, and they'll pay. Many of them will die as a result. So it's not as though they're going to be in the rear with the gear. They're going to be on the front line doing things.
So this is the Ukrainian version of Hot Lips Houlihan from MASH?
I'd take it even further. If Hot Lips on a regular basis went to the forward battle zone and was evacuating people straight from that, I think that. But look, it is going to be Hot Lips Houlihan because many of these women are going to be in the I think the other thing the Ukrainians are looking at doing is trying to push some of their medical support as far forward as possible, because they are suffering far too many casualties because they can't get them removed from the battlefield during that golden hour. It takes too long to get them back to where the adequate military care is. So by bringing these women in, I think they're going to try and push medical support forward so that you can get the people from where they were wounded to at least initial life-saving treatment before the golden hour runs out.
More important, what do you think that Hot Lips Houlihan saw in Frank Burns? That guy was a nerd. Did that drive you crazy or not?
Well, I mean, she saw money and power. He was an authority figure, and he was her ticket to prominence. But I think she quickly realized what a feeble person Frank Burns was.
Hawkeye was so much more fun. And I think we did this question already, didn't we?
Have you heard anything of subject concerning supposed? Yes, we did that question.
Yeah. Well, everybody, I give marching orders. Let's give a lot of attention to the Angel in Quebec, but not so much attention that we do the same question twice. All right. Right here, right now, from Rumble. How did Gary Powers capture affect or effect? This would be the A spelling. That would be the correct one. Effect. U.S. political diplomacy. Decades. See, these live questions, I don't have time to fix the grammar, and it's hard to read them. Does Putin plink with his... And let's make it require a modicum of grammatical correctness just so we can understand the question. Does Putin plink with his high standard on weekend? What the hell is that? Plink.
High standard's a pistol.
What does plink mean?
It's shooting, target shooting.
Oh, okay. Then I just don't know the word. My mistake. Sorry. Did you visit Gary's exhibit in Moscow?
No, I didn't. I was in Ekaterinburg, which is Sverdlovsk, and Gary Powers' U-2 was shot down over Sverdlovsk, and there is a Gary Powers display there. But in Moscow, I did not. If I ever have the opportunity to return to Moscow, I will make sure that I spend more time visiting the various military museums. That would include that. Look, the shooting down of Gary Powers put U.S.-Soviet relations on hold at a time when Dwight D. Eisenhower was considering possible venues to improve relations. The shooting down of that brought an end to that, and that carried over into the Kennedy administration and led to some of the breakdown in discussions that maybe had they been going, we could have prevented the Cuban Missile Crisis. So yeah, Gary Powers' shoot down had a detrimental impact on this. It also had a detrimental impact on, because prior to Gary Powers being shot down, there was this Texan piano player known as Van Cliburn who went over there and did his own little thing and started to, he won the hearts of the Soviets and was well received here in the United States for having the courage to go and open up relations, and all that got thrown out too because of Gary Powers being shot down.
Have you guys figured out what you will do for episode 100? Yes. Instead of the one measly, tiny, girly sip that Scott took tonight, he will take 3 full-throttled shots, and we will cry and tear and have a virtual hug. That's what I propose for episode 100, at the very least. What do you say?
Jeff, I respect you, and I will take everything you said under consideration. But I doubt it.
Wouldn't feel so all alone. Everybody must get stoned.
All right, let's move on to another question. Enough of that silliness. This is serious. We're going to get the people angry at me again for being too comedic. Cyber Blue Panda. The audience continues to escalate on Twitch. This makes me very happy. Will the new coup leaders in North Africa, what is North a dirty word? I don't understand the
Niger, because it looks like the N word. So we did that.
So we can't say it because it resembles the N-word?
I think Twitch deleted it, or
Yeah, this is an
something
internal
when
Twitch
you-
thing.
That's
yeah,
ridiculous.
it was Twitch.
Can we just organize a protest right now? Somebody make me a picket sign and tell me where to go. How absurd. All right, whatever. Well, the new coup leaders in Niger, can't say it. Am I allowed to say it? Be eliminated by the U.S., or will they keep their positions, persevere? Sorry, Twitch is sensitive. Thank you. Love you guys, and Anne and Maverick. Thank you, Cyru Planda. I love you too. In fact, I think we should share a summer home together next summer. You, me, Scott, and Ann. Fire Island. Who's in?
Siri, will you allow me to share a summer home with Jeff?
Well, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention Siri is also in, of course.
Yeah, so I think the answer is no.
Oh, stop it. Come on, Siri. Loosen up, baby.
Okay. I think the United States is not in the business of eliminating the coup leaders in Niger. The United States has been playing this very close to vest. I don't think we're going to be doing that. We need to maintain our bases in Niger, and if we tried to remove a coup leader and we failed, that would be the end of our base. That we put hundreds, if not thousands, of American forces at risk. The risk-reward calculus that takes place before a decision of that. Too much risk, too little reward. Not worth doing.
Niger. All right. What else we have in the way of questions, Ann? Are the reports of a Russian helicopter defecting to... You're not yawning, are you?
No.
You're just rubbing... You're just giving yourself a face massage? Okay.
Yeah.
Are the reports of a Russian helicopter defecting to Ukraine true, or is it just another Ghost or Kiev comic strip? Can it be a defection if he was paid $500,000 by Ukraine?
Yeah, we pay people to defect all the time. It can be a defection. I think this story is true. There's a tragic element to it. This pilot didn't tell his crew that he was doing this. So when they landed in Ukraine, the crew tried to escape, and they were subsequently killed by the Ukrainian authorities. So, not
so
only
a defection is a defection, regardless of whether or not somebody is paid. One might judge the defection in a different way, but that doesn't change the definition.
He still defected. He defected to the other side. This case, he was lured to defect by the Ukrainian intelligence services, who promised him a sum of money. But he's a traitor to his cause, and I don't imagine he'll be long for this world. He didn't just take a helicopter. His actions resulted in 2 patriotic Russian servicemen.
In Israelis from October 7th, it admits that there are far fewer than what the IDF are proclaiming. And so there's so much footage now showing that, Israel has really overstepped its bounds and exposed itself, because it also has the Hannibal Directive. So you were talking about Israel's strategy. It has a Hannibal Directive, which says that Israel is not really bound to protect the so-called hostages or prisoners of war that have been captured. They don't have any duty to protect them. So oftentimes their number one priority is to just slay, and slaughter on the scene, and that leads to deaths of Israelis themselves. So this is a really ugly scene that, I don't think anyone could have predicted would have happened now, but I think you may bring up a really good point about the Saudi-Israel normalization process. The timing of this is, to me, ingenious, because Israel has committed these atrocities and is committing an actual genocide right now. And that has absolutely killed this normalization process, probably indefinitely. I mean, that's what Saudi Arabia says, but the
Well, they
situation
said
does not look good.
they said that it. I mean, Saudi Arabia is. I mean, they're playing this pretty in an interesting fashion because they didn't jump on the they didn't do the Bahrain thing. Bahrain just
Right.
one of the first people to normalize relations. Bahrain just shut down diplomatic relations, kicked out the Israeli ambassador, said we're done, we're finished. Saudi Arabia could have done that, but in doing that, you take all the leverage out because I think Saudi Arabia understands that this is the chance to get a Palestinian state. That from this disaster that's taking place, there can be a Palestinian state. So what they said is not only they didn't say, we will resume negotiations down the road when this is done, which would have been reasonable. They said, we'll continue talking right now. We'll continue to meet with Israel right now to talk about normalization. But understand, there will never be normalization until there's a Palestinian state. And so they're making the linkage there so that if Israel knows that if Israel comes to the table and talks to Saudi Arabia, that a state for Palestine, statehood for Palestine will be part of the negotiation. Israel's really shot itself, not just in the foot, but in the knees, in the hip, in the gut. They've done everything wrong here. They've done nothing right.
Indeed, indeed. And perhaps we can return to the military component here because, the IDF has been championed as one of the strongest militaries in the world. It's almost infallible given how weaponized it has become, how much U.S. backing it has, and, of course, how much catastrophe and devastation it can cause, which we are seeing right now in the bombardment of Gaza. But you have said earlier and repeatedly on other programs on X and in your writing that this is really Israel's undoing. So how is it then that Palestinian resistance, which doesn't have anywhere near the fraction of the backing, Hamas, no matter how many weapons it has and how genius it is nowhere near the so-called military might of the IDF. How is it that they're able to do this? And how is it that it looks like Israel is the one on the brink and not Palestine and its resistance?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to look at a couple things. One, the United States has made it part of our strategy towards Israel to ensure that Israel has has technological, not just superiority, but supremacy, meaning that the weapon systems available to Israel will always far outclass anything that its potential adversaries will have. So we've been, providing Israel with the F-35Is. They're improved to deal with the Israeli way of doing business. We've given them all the bombs they want, these JDAMs, these satellite-guided bombs. We've worked with them to build the Iron Dome anti-missile shield, the Merkava tank, and their armored personnel carriers are designed for the modern battlefield, considered to be the best tanks in the world. So it's all this technology that's put to bear. And then Israel also combines that with a very heavy reliance on intelligence, like human intelligence, technical intelligence, et cetera, to tip things off. And then they have a very aggressive doctrine to go out and try and preempt issues before they happen. They have a handful of units that are pretty good. Sariyat Matkal, the General Reconnaissance Unit. A lot of people say it's the equivalent of Delta Force. Let me just set you guys straight here. Sariyat Matkal is decent, but they're young kids with very little experience. They've got some old seasoned hands in there, but the average age of Delta Force is around 35 years old. These are guys that enlisted when they were 18. And so they've already been in the Army for 20 years. They've gone through Ranger training, Special Forces training. They have a couple combat tours. So they're very mature players by the time they join Delta. Sariyat Matkal isn't anywhere near Delta Force in terms of the quality of their thing. They have legendary status based upon some things they've done, like the Entebbe rescue and things of that nature. But when you read the actual histories of the operational details of Sergeant McCall's operations, they're not Supermen. They make a lot of mistakes. They've suffered horrendous casualties so far in this campaign. The IDF is casualty averse, meaning every army is casualty averse. I mean, it's nobody wants to die, but you accept the risks, meaning that, look at the Taliban. Ask the Taliban when the Taliban spoke about U.S. Marines, they said, we don't like to fight Marines. Why? Because when we shot at the Marines, they ran towards the guns. They came at us and they kept coming towards us till they found who shot them and killed them. And we got tired of running away and dying. Now the Marines suffered casualties because that kind of aggression leads to casualties, but the Marines prevailed. That's how you win the battlefield, by being aggressive. The Israelis have removed aggression from that. Their forces are very passive. Plus, again, a Marine, 13 weeks of basic training, another dozen weeks of advanced individual training. Then you join the unit, your battalion. You're going to get 6 to 8 months of welcome aboard, then 6 more months of pre-deployment training, and then you're going to deploy. But when you deploy in that battalion, you may be the rookie, but you're surrounded by a unit with guys that have been in for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years. We've done multiple tours, so it's a very combat hardened unit, a combat capable unit. Your Israeli battalion is composed exclusively, with the exception of some NCOs and senior officers, of conscripts, guys that are in for 2.5 years. You can't be a good soldier in 2.5 years. You can't be. You can't. It can't happen. You can't be a good combat team in 2.5 years. And that's the entire Israeli military. Again, with the exception of some NCOs and some officers. Your average Israeli is a 18, 19, 20-year-old kid who, they aren't combat hardened. The Israelis are very technological. Their military isn't designed to, attract, the toughest and the roughest. Who's the smartest guy here? How can we outsmart the enemy? None of them want to die. Nobody wants to die, but none of them are out there saying, to the guns, to the guns, to the guns. That's why Hamas did so well against the Golani Brigade, the elite infantry unit, 13th and 51st Battalion, slapped around. These Israeli forces, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. They haven't been training to do the fighting that they've been doing. They don't spend a lot of time in the field wearing 70 pounds of personal protective gear. They don't run around, and they're not hard men. They're soft men. And they start to make mistakes. And you see a lot of these mistakes being made right now in Gaza. These guys aren't that good. You know who's good? Hamas, especially the frontline brigades or combat units. They're very good, very physically fit, motivated. There's a video making the rounds right now that looks to be accurate. It shows a 2-man anti-tank crew coming out of one of the tunnels, coming up. They run up to one of the Merkava tanks. The cojones on this guy, and he's saying sort of the Arabic death prayer because he's expected not to make it. But he runs up to the tank and he places an explosive device on the tank, not to destroy the tank, but to destroy the protective system, because the tanks have these radars and these reactive devices, so that if you shoot an anti-tank round at it, it detects that movement and then blows shotgun shells, buckshot this way to set off the shaped charge, so that when it hits, it's not taking out the tank. So they went in, placed that by hand right where it needed to be placed to blow up that system, the trophy system, I think it's called. And then the other guy came out and popped it with the anti-tank system. I mean, those are big brass, whats, man. I mean, that's something. And these guys are smart enough to know what they have to do. They've clearly practiced this before, and now they're executing it flawlessly. Now, I'm sure that there's a bunch of guys that tried this and didn't make it. I'm sure, because these guys had the go cam, so we're watching the team that made it. I guarantee you there's 100 dead Hamas fighters, guys who crawled out of a hole and started running towards a tank to be detected by the Israelis, and they got machine gunned down. You know, they're not supermen, they're not immortal, but there's a lot of them, and they are very aggressive, and they know what they're doing. Israel is moving into their territory. The Israeli troops are scared. Look, again, another video. Hamas sends out a drone with, you know, like you see all the time out of, out of Ukraine, with the grenade dangling below it. And it comes in. There's an Israeli unit that's cleared out of space. Now, I don't know what the hell. This is a combat zone. So even if you don't expect a drone to fly over, mortars. I mean, come on, guys, but they're all clustered together in the middle having lunch. They're all like sitting there together. Dude, you should be dug in facing outward. One or two men per hole, spacing, cover, so that if they get a lucky round in, you only lose two guys. Said they're all gumped up there. Had the grenade been 5 meters to the left, they would have killed a whole bunch more people. As it is, it landed, took down about 8 of them. Professional soldiers don't do that. Professional soldiers don't behave. The Israelis right now are reservists. They're fat guys who have come off of a couple years out of the military. They've now been called back up. They don't want to be there. They're not trained for this. They're not physically fit for this. They're not mentally prepared for this. And they're getting ready to enter into a fight that only the strongest can survive. The Israeli Defense Force just is not a very good unit. And Hamas is good. You know who's better? Hezbollah. And if Hezbollah decides to engage, I don't think people picked up on what happened yesterday. Hezbollah, and the Israelis talked about it. Hezbollah released, I think, 4 different kinds of weapons yesterday that they've been holding on to. These are weapons that Israel can't stop. These are precision weapons. And they did it in a way that Israel knew about it, because the Israeli went, we're seeing things coming out of Hezbollah that we've never seen before, and it's scaring us to death because they're killing our guys and we can't stop it. This is a weapon we can't stop. We're not prepared for this. We've never expected this. And if you think if Hezbollah is just doing that, how many more of those do they have? New weapons that Israel's not ready for. And the Hezbollah fighters are they're better trained than the Hamas fighters. Israel's in a lot of trouble because their army just isn't that good. And once the mythology of Israeli invincibility is burst, it's over.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said as you were describing the battle-hardened skills and spirit of an organization like Hezbollah and even Hamas, both of which have been fighting protracted wars for quite a long time, while the IDF has been fighting, as you said, in a very different way. And it really is not looking good for Israel. But I wanted to also talk about this regional war. So you're talking about Hezbollah. You mentioned Iran. There's a lot of pressure on countries around the world, and especially in that region. Where do you see this going? I know that you said that Hezbollah faces a lot of pressure, but I don't think it's a guarantee that they will enter in full force.
I agree. Yeah.
Where do you see this going exactly? Because I agree with you in terms of Hamas's purpose. I don't think was to eliminate or eradicate Israel. I don't think that was really ever in the cards, given just the state of things for Palestine. But at the same time, this has been a long-standing problem historically. This is a long historical problem, many, 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 many decades, since 1948, arguably. How does this end? Biden's talking about a pause. There's a lot of pressure on the United States. The European states are all over the place. Lots of divides there. How do you see this ending?
Well, I've spent all day researching and writing an article that I hope to get published tomorrow. That's about basically the escalation ladder. And I'll just talk about, because I find it fascinating, but I'm a nerd, so what the hell. But your standard single prong escalation ladder basically, is logical, meaning that you start, down here in peace, you finish up here in war, and it's just it's the steps to take to advance. What has to happen in terms of, provocation? What makes you move from a peaceful thing to a prepared stance? Something had to trigger that. Then what would it take to prepare you to being, even more prepared, than to preempt and then to be in full scale war? How do you run up that escalation ladder? But that very rarely happens. You very rarely get the single strand. Oftentimes you get multiple strands. And a lot of times they use this in business. For instance, you have people talking about global warming and climate change policy. And then, so you can't just say, what is our strategy for oil? Because you need, as your strategy for oil progresses, it impacts your strategy for nuclear energy, which impacts your strategy for renewable energy. And so the three things have to coordinate with each other. And that's what we're looking at right now. We have Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. Now there's each one of those can break down to different, for instance, Hamas, Hezbollah, but Hezbollah isn't just Hezbollah, because when we speak of the Lebanese border, there's a Lebanese Hamas out there. They just fired some weapons today. They're hooking and jabbing. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad is operating out of Lebanon. There's other Palestinian factions operating out of Lebanon, and Hezbollah is trying to control them. So even within Hezbollah, there's, different ladders going up. Iran, they deal with the Syrian and Iraqi Shia militias, which are responsive to Iran, but also the Houthi. And we just saw the Houthi just decide the hell with it. They went, screw it, we're going to war, launch the missiles. And Iran's going, what? Don't launch the missiles. Don't launch the missiles, because you just screwed up my escalation ladder. I'm sitting here because Iran's talking to the United States. You know this. The Iran foreign minister came to New York. Okay, there were conversations, direct conversations, the kind of conversations that have to take place, which is, hey guys, Israel screwed up. Right now, I got a whole bunch of screaming meanies in Syria and Iraq that are screaming for your blood, and they're going to get it. Now, the question is, how are you going to respond? Because we're going to try and slow them down, but we can't stop them. There has to be a pressure relief valve. The pressure relief valve is they're going to get to fire some drones and rockets against your bases. You're going to take casualties. So you get to bomb our stuff, and we're going to take casualties. This is how we're going to control. We're going to work our escalation up here, but we're doing it in a way to relieve pressure, not increase pressure. It's a pressure relief system, which works until the Houthi starts firing rockets. Now the Americans have to start shooting that down and change the equation, and now you see the escalation go up, but it wasn't intended to go up. And now Hezbollah is sitting there going, damn it, they're out there, hooking and jabbing in the deserts of Syria and Iraq, and we're here. We got to start. And Hezbollah is working with Iran to communicate through their various channels to both Israel, because Hezbollah has a direct line with the Israelis. They have a direct line with Israel. I'm just telling you right now, they do. And Hezbollah is telling the Israelis, we're going to kill about 40 of you guys the next week, and you're going to kill about 50 of our guys, and we're just going to let it hang with there, okay? We don't want this thing to get out of control. We're going to limit the battlefield here, limited scope, escalation ladder. Meanwhile, Hamas is out there doing their thing, and Israel overreacts by blowing up a refugee camp. Boom! Enraged people more. Now you got to bring the escalation ladder up even more to relieve the pressure, because that's all this is. It's a pressure relief system, and you keep increasing the pressure. And this is where we're at right now. Very, very dangerous system. The United States is deploying, in the process of deploying 2 aircraft carriers, a Marine Amphibious Readiness Group, a whole bunch of ships off the coast. You guys, I hope everybody understands that's nothing. Literally, it's zero combat power. Scott, they have hundreds of airplanes. Yeah, so what? What are they going to do? You think the United States are going to fly multiple combat sorties against Hezbollah? Because the second they do that, Iran gets involved. And you know what isn't going to happen? America's not going to beat Iran. Can't happen. Donald Trump tried to flex that muscle. Remember when they shot down the RQ-4 Global Hawk? And Trump was saying, we got to strike the Iranian defense systems. And the Pentagon went up to him and said, boss, you do that, and the escalation ladder kicks in. And what's going to happen is you're going to hit them, they're going to hit us. Now you're going to get pissed because when they hit us, they're going to sink a ship. And when they sink a ship and you got 300 dead sailors, you're going to say, hit them hard. And when you hit them hard, you're going to say, hit their oil. Then they're going to hit Saudi Arabian oil. And then it's all over because the economy sunk. And now we're in a general war with Iran, and we don't have the troops to do that. It's going to take us 9 to 12 months just to generate this power. Now we got to move the power overseas into the Middle East. This ain't Desert Storm. We don't have ports that are going to receive us without fire. The Iranians are going to be taking out the ports, sinking the ships, blowing up the airfields. 900,000 men is what it's going to take. And even then, there's no guarantee of victory. We know this because we've been through this before. It's not like, Joe Biden is going, hey, what happens if we go to war against Iran? It was just a couple of years ago, and the Pentagon goes, we got the answer to that one, boss. We lose. So all this deployment of forces is purely for political show, for domestic political consumption. So Joe Biden can say, I'm doing something, but he's doing nothing. It's all part of the.
Did we do this one yet?
Yes,
No.
we did that one.
Oh, we did. Okay. I thought I recognized it. Boy, I don't know if I even want to try to pronounce that name. What is the event objective that will end the Israel-Hamas war?
America telling Israel enough is enough. That's the only thing that's going to end this war, is America telling Israel enough is enough. That begins the process of ending it, and then there's going to have to be a whole bunch of other adjustments because Hamas isn't going away. I don't. Danny, hi, Danny Haifong. Danny's digging the candle in the back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Yankee candle. I'm addicted to Yankee candles. Marina hates me because of Yankee candles. Every time we go to the mall, I insist on going to the Yankee Candle store and buying Yankee candles. And I have a drawer full of Yankee candles that have yet to be burned. And yet I continue to buy more. It's a disease. So thanks, Danny, for bringing up my addiction on national TV.
It's better than the Diet Coke addiction. unless you're swallowing the candle wax.
What?
I said it's better than the Diet Coke addiction unless you're swallowing the candle wax.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that. I just heard candle wax. I don't understand. But I don't understand half of the things I get involved in lately. Anyways, where was I before Danny Haifong? So
I don't know.
Jumped. Anyways, let's move on to the next question.
All right. Let's see. Here's another voicemail message from Ali.
Question is, if there was to be a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine, would the Palestinians be allowed to have a standing army for their own national security reasons?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really, really good question. I think I've been very honest that for the longest time I was on Team Israel, and that was probably because of legacy. What I mean by legacy is because of the Gulf War, because of my role in trying to stop Scud missiles from flying into Israel, and then as a weapons inspector working very closely with Israeli intelligence to figure out, what the final disposition of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction were. When you work closely with people, you tend to identify with these people, and these were good people, really good people. I brought my wife over to Israel, and she was there in 1995, and we really enjoyed it. A beautiful country, beautiful culture, beautiful history, beautiful everything. Were we ignorant of the Palestinian? You couldn't be, because every day a Hamas bomber blew himself up and killed people. So you understood what was going on, but you didn't dig deep, because that wasn't my job. My job wasn't to go there to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. My job was to work with Israel to solve the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction issue. And if you know anything about me, I am as focused. When I say I'm going to do something, I'm focused on that to the detriment of everything else. So I didn't even delve into the problematics of, why Israel exists, what they are. I mean, I did the tours. I saw things. I'm not stupid, but it just looks like it's very interesting. Nice history, nice history. Yes, yes, Palestinian problem, da da da. But my job was Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, and even when the Intifada came up and things of that nature, I never really dug into that. That wasn't my thing. And the reason why I preface it this way is that I can't claim to be as informed as an Eva Bartlett on the issues of Palestinian statehood. I have had a lot of talks with Israelis about this issue. I've had no talks, no substantive talks with a Palestinian about this. Just being dead honest with you guys. I mean, I've since this thing has happened, I've interacted with Palestinians online, but I've never been invited to a conference to talk about this issue. Why would they invite me? I don't know anything about it. I mean, I'm superficial about it. I'm not an expert on Palestinian statehood. But having said that, I do try to keep myself informed. And what I have found out, and people could correct me if I'm wrong, but for instance, the Egyptian government supports a Palestinian state, but no standing military. The Jordanians, no standing. I don't think there's any vision of a two-state Palestinian state that has the Palestinians having a standing army. And as soon as I found out about that, I was like, well, then it's not really a Palestinian state, is it? Because how can you be a sovereign state if you're not responsible for your own, your own security? You'd have to, the Israelis now are going to respond. And that's the problem, because Israel can't be trusted with this. We see what Israel does when they have security. They beat up Palestinian children. They shoot Palestinian women. They kill the Palestinians because Israel doesn't know how to behave responsibly. They don't play well in the playground. But I think right now, the working notion of people October 6th and before was that there would be no standing military. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The Palestinian state has a standing army. It's called Hamas. They're the Qassam Brigades. That's a standing army. They are a military force. They ain't going away. Israel's not going to beat them. And so whatever exists in the Palestinian state is going to have a military force. The Palestinian people can never again trust Israel to be involved in any aspect of their security. That formulation might have worked in Oslo 1, Oslo 2, when you had a Yitzhak Rabin talking with a Yasser Arafat. But today, with Abbas being the corrupt, pro-Israeli toad that he is, the Palestinian Authority is no longer viable. It's not a militia. You could call it a militia, but they're an armed force. They're more professional than half the armies in the Middle East. So at least be respectful of the fact that they are organized like a military. They have a hierarchy. They have command, a command structure. They have logistics. They have communications. It's a military. And they are the military force of Gaza right now. And they will become, I believe, the military force of a Palestinian state. They might have to rename themselves. The United States pulled that clever trick in Syria when we were trying to work with, I think, the YPG. Don't ask me what the Kurdish militia group, but they were affiliated with the PKK, which is the Kurdish People's Party out of Turkey, which is a terrorist group. And the United States is going, well, we're having a hard time working with the terrorist group. Legally, we have trouble. So what did we do? Flew a general in and said, hey, all you YPG terrorists, we're going to rename you. You're going to be called the Kurdish Democratic Forces or something of that nature. Kurdish Democratic. Wow. They're democratic. They're not terrorists anymore. We simply renamed them. So I would imagine Hamas might go through some sort of name change, that they'll stop being Hamas and they'll become the Gazan security force. It's Hamas. It'll never go away because it's never going to be beaten, and they have far too much legitimacy and far too much authority now because of what they've done with Israel. I think the question was, can there be a two-state solution without a standing Palestinian military? Not anymore, because Hamas has earned the right to be the standing military of the Palestinian people.
All right, here's a question from a gentle man named Lance.
My question is, I guess I had heard that when Hamas attacked on October 7th, they managed to take a lot of intelligence, like servers with intelligence on them, like Epstein blackmail of politicians or Epstein type blackmail of politicians globally, all the names of spies around the world and in Gaza itself, all kinds of things they've made off with these servers with all of this valuable information. If that's true, then is that why the heavy-handed approach to everything and blocking of internet, blocking of reporters, blockading of everything because they don't want those servers getting out?
Well, good question. First of all, the way intelligence works, let's just use the thing you said, the Epstein blackmail list. That isn't going to be in the forward intelligence unit operating by the Gazan border, and there will be no connectivity. When you have human intelligence of that nature, the computer that's going to be on is going to be air gapped and kept separate, and nobody's ever going to get near it unless you're Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible and you come through the roof. But then don't sweat on the floor because the alarm goes off. But the point is, that information is going to be someplace far away from Gaza, deep in the ground, heavily secured, and Hamas isn't going to gain access to that. What was the servers they got were the tactical human intelligence, basically the stuff that they were using to run agents inside and out of Gaza, all that stuff. Hamas got that. The same thing with the SIGINT, where the phone taps are, who your suppliers are for cell phones that you're trying to infiltrate in, so that you can have a cell phone in the hand of a Hamas guy who thinks he has a burner phone that nobody knows about, but Israel provided that burner phone and is tracking it. All that information's on servers. Anything that was tactical or operational related to the Gaza barrier were on the servers that Hamas got. The Israelis are professionals. I mean, Scott, how professional can they be having made all these mistakes? Well, they made mistakes, but they still, as an intelligence professional, once the enemy gets the server or something, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. It's out. It's done. Finished. And so the Israelis aren't trying to stop that stuff from being spread. What they're saying is, we know that it's all been compromised. We're trying to seal off the compromise. We're trying to figure out how much went there and where we can draw the line to say all of this is done, change everything. This we can preserve. And that's what's going on. But the Israelis, they have to assume that everything that they lost that day, the Iranians have, and they're acting on it right now. Hamas has, they're acting on it. Hezbollah is acting on it. And so they have to change. This is why I think there was one of the reasons why there was such a delay in going into Gaza, is that Israel had to basically purge the system, clean it out, because anything that was on those servers can no longer be allowed to have any relevance with reality. So you have to change all your codes, you have to change your systems, you have to change, if you were relying on human networks, you have to assume that everybody that you were running is gone, finished, they're going to die. That was Hamas having a big old fight at my feet. That was actually Maverick and Machismo fighting over a bone. I think I lost 3 toes, but yeah, that's a lot of violence. But the fact is, this was a huge compromise, and the Israelis had to basically change everything they did from a tactical intelligence standpoint because everything was compromised. They're not just codes, not just frequencies, not just human assets, but how they do things, your procedures, your techniques, and everything. They have to go in and relook everything so that when they start moving in, Hamas can't sit there and say, "Oh, we know what they're going to do because we now have that plan." They have to alter it up. So this is a huge defeat for Israel, And the other thing, the intelligence people don't like to admit this because, or security people, there's only so many ways you can skin a cat. So if you've lost your book that you've built on how you do things, and that's all gone, it's not like you can say, well, then we're going to go to plan C. No, there's only some ways. There's only one way to do it, and you lost it, which means you're just going to have to find a way to do it that way that they aren't aware of it or something. But running human agents, it's just the same techniques of recruitment and agent running that were used back in Machiavelli's days are being used today. There's some technology differences, but it's the same thing. And so, I don't think the Israelis are going to be able to recover from this very easily. Definitely not this soon. They lost a lot of information, and this is a huge problem. There will have to be a commission formed like they did after Yom Kippur in 1973, and heads are going to have to roll. And basically, my feeling is that the entire establishment that was in that was in a position of power will be removed because they are all guilty one way or another. They all have blood on their hands.
Let's give away the Knowledge is Power t-shirt. And those of you who have entered in the live chat by typing in #shirt are eligible. And we thank you for your participation. And let's do the drawing.
I'm disappointed that only 383. Aaron.
All right. Oron, if that's how it's pronounced, congratulations to you. Send us an email at info@ustourofduty.org to let us know how to send you your t-shirt. And if you would like to buy the t-shirt, you can go to scottrittermerch.com, where we're also selling the Scott Ritter Challenge coin. And this other t-shirt, Ask the Inspector. And let's not forget Scott's book, which he has autographed, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika. All that available at scottrittermerch.com. And Christmas is coming. What could be a better gift? I can't think of anything. Next question comes from Suzanne Guiho in Quebec. Please explain the borders in Palestine and Israel. To me, it looks like it's all Israel except for the Gaza Strip.
To explain. All right. We'll just take it back to there was the 6-Day War in 1967. Israel occupied the West Bank, got to the Wailing Wall, took over, I think Western Jerusalem, Golan Heights, cleaned up the Negev, and people have said that that's going to be the boundaries. It's called the Green Line. 1967 Green Line. Since then, and especially in the last couple decades, the Israelis have been chipping away at, especially in the West Bank. They've been putting in these settlements, illegal settlements, and they've been stealing Palestinian land. And as a result, the area, there's a series of maps that you can look up that show how Palestine has changed. And basically the map, everything that was green on the map would have been part of a Palestinian state. And you just see, especially in the West Bank, this green disappearing into little dots as the Israelis just steal land, buy land, murder people, whatever, and they eliminate that. If there's going to be a Palestinian state, all that green that was taken away is going to have to be given back, meaning that the settlements won't be allowed to I don't believe, again, I could be wrong on this, but I don't see how you can have a Palestinian state if you allow what Israeli settlements do to stand. I think you have to go back to 1967, and everything that happened since then in terms of the theft of Palestinian land has to be undone. And if you're a Brooklyn Jew who went over to Israel to rob people, kill people, murder people, and steal their land, so sad, too bad. And then I would like to see laws passed that we don't allow those Brooklyn Jews back into Brooklyn because you've done things that are just illegal and in violation of, human rights and in international law, and you're a murderer and you're a robber, you're a thief, and you're stuck. You get to stay in Israel, but you have to work. You can't just steal other people's lands to make a living. There's hundreds of thousands of American Jews that go over to Israel and they call themselves settlers. They're thieves. They're thieves. They're robbers. They're murderers. They're the most horrible people on the planet. They're Americans, by the way. They have dual passports, dual citizenship, but they shouldn't allowed to be Americans. If we did this anywhere else, if we had a group of Americans that went over to, pick another country, any country, Suriname, and just said, we're going to Suriname, we're going to steal land, murder people, and set up our own thing, our government wouldn't allow it. But we let American Jews, hundreds of thousands of them, fly to Israel to steal Palestinian land. These fat, no good Brooklyn Jews. And I'm not against Jews. I'm just calling out what they are. Fat, no good Brooklyn Jews who went over to Israel to steal land. Doesn't mean that all Jews are bad. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you're a fat Brooklyn Jew that went over to Israel to steal land, you're a bad person. It's not because you're Jewish. You identify as a Jew because you're a no good person who steals land in the name of Judaism, or in the name of Zionism. But that all has to be undone. So the best way to look at that is to go, I think if you Google, there's a series of maps that are linked to the Abrams Accord. If you look at that, you'll see how the green that was the West Bank turned into very little green. That's all going to have to be undone if there's going to be a viable two-state solution or one-state solution. The Palestinians have to have their own land.
All right. The good news is we can accommodate the fat Brooklyn Jews if they want to buy a T-shirt, because we do have extra large times 2, and even extra large times 3. Ann Moss, curating the questions and comments backstage. Thanks for your good work, Ann. Let's take a couple of questions coming in live. This is from RKOWED, Ricard, watching on YouTube live.
That's probably why. Probably why, not who.
Oh, okay. Why don't the oil-rich Arabs stop the flow of oil to Israel? Wouldn't that put pressure on them and end the war machine?
Well, it would. That's why nations like Iran have called for it. But if you're going to do that, all nations have to participate, and you have to be willing to pay the consequences. There would be, the United States would impose sanctions. It would be very disruptive to your own economy. Saudi Arabia has this thing called Vision 2030, where they're trying to wean themselves off of being nothing but a supplier of oil to diversify their economy. So they're investing heavily in, rebuilding, redefining Saudi Arabia. An oil embargo against Israel that then turns into a global energy war that denies Saudi Arabia the income, could not only disrupt Vision 2030, but it could create domestic unrest, as Saudi Arabia may not be able to continue the same level of subsidies that they currently provide. So, Saudi Arabia sitting there going, well, we're not in favor of this. We have a thing going where we're heading towards a strategic vision. We're not going to throw it away for Gaza, and nobody else wants to do it too. Nobody wants to be the only nation not selling oil to Israel, because you just isolate yourself. Okay, so it's got to be all or nothing. And right now, there's too many nations that look at Turkey. Erdogan is sitting there, talking about, standing up to Israel, calling them a war crime, calling Netanyahu a war criminal. And yet Erdogan's not doing anything to stop the flow of oil from Azerbaijan through pipelines on Turkish soil into a Turkish harbor and then on to Israel. Why? Because Erdogan needs Israel. In what was it, 2018, they cut off relations. they just recently restored relations in August of this year. And one of the reasons why they did that is because of all the gas that's been discovered off the shore of Israel into the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey, wants a share of that gas, but they also want to make sure that when Israel develops this gas, that it goes to market. Israel wants to send it to Europe, but the best way to get it to Europe is through Turkey, which means you want to convert Turkey into an energy hub. In order to do that, Turkey has to continue relations with Israel. They call it a war crime state. So there's a lot of talking out this mouth and then talking out this mouth. There was a video out there that was pretty cool. It basically had a Palestinian flag and had an Israeli flag, and actors playing all these different leaders would come out, and they point up and then dance over to the flag that they support. And in the end, Erdogan comes out and he splits into two people. One goes to Israel, one goes to Palestine, because that's Erdogan. He's straddling the fence. So, yeah, I don't see at this point in time nations willing to commit long-term economic suicide for the short-term gain of stuff. Because the other thing is, nobody wants a Palestinian state. I mean, everybody's talking about it right now, but they're only talking about it because of the new realities that are going on the ground. But there's not too many friends of Palestine out there, if a Palestinian state is going to change the geopolitical realities of that region in ways that some of these nations may not like. And so they're not too anxious to rush this process. If there's going to be a Palestinian state, they want to extend the process of deliberation so that they can be fully cognizant of what's about to be given birth, and they can be prepared. They can, set aside the room. They can paint it the right color. They can have the crib ready and the toys. Well, what they don't want is just, bam, there's a baby and they're not ready for a baby. And so I think that's another reason why they aren't pushing for a solution on this. Hamas, I think they're nervous about the strength of Hamas right now. And so maybe many of these Arab nations would like to see Hamas brought down a peg or two before this war ends, so that they're not as strong going forward as they are, right now. So there's a lot of reasons why Arab countries aren't going to be using the oil weapon to prevent this. And the biggest one is hypocrisy, because they don't care about the Palestinian people. Never have, never will.
All right, let's take one more question and make it a good one. Does Scott know? Oh, this is a good one. I saw this myself. That was kind of curious about that. Does Scott know that the NYPD has an office in Israel and Israeli police have an office in New York City?
Yes, I know that. I also know that the NYPD for a while, they still do. They hire former CIA operatives that have a relationship with Israeli intelligence, but they share a lot of intelligence. New York City is very worried about Islamic terrorism after 9/11, and so Israel has an intelligence service that tracks these things, and so they maintain line of communication. They make sure that they're tracking the same problems. Israel's worried about pro-Palestinian groups in the United States who raise money for Hamas. So NYPD keeps Israel. It's a scratch my back, I scratch your back relationship. It's a very close relationship. There might be many aspects of this that are fundamentally illegal. It's of concern because the NYPD may be violating the constitutional rights of American citizens of Palestinian origin, because you're not allowed to collect intelligence on American citizens as a domestic law enforcement unit without a warrant or without cause, and you're damn sure not allowed to share that intelligence with foreign, with a foreign country. And I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. But yeah, no, I'm aware of that unit.
Well, what about the flood of immigrants coming through from the southern border? I don't think Israel's in a position to provide intelligence on that situation. Should we be worried about that?
Well, two aspects of that. One, there's, according to some sources, there have been a score or more of Hamas affiliated individuals who have come across the border in the South. We're not talking millions, we're not talking thousands, we're not talking even hundreds, but a handful. But all it takes is a handful.
Yeah.
And Israel does play a role in helping us monitor those movements. The Israelis are very much involved in Latin America and South America because for a while there was a sort of this triangle area in the Amazon where Hamas was and Hezbollah were establishing themselves. And so, no, the Israelis do follow that. But I look, every nation, in order to be truly secure, you have to control your borders, I believe. Because if you don't control your borders, you're not in control of anything. And so I think that, the larger issue is, should America be concerned about the situation on our southern borders? The answer is yes, absolutely. Because if you don't know what's going on, one of these days, something bad's going to happen. And, that's what we pay these people to do, is prevent bad things from happening to us. So there's that. I think that the Hamas connection, see, this is where I'd get into a debate with one of my friends who he would say, it's a serious issue, we have to take it serious, da-da-da. I personally believe that the Hamas connection with the South is sort of an overblown issue, but his point will be, do you know that for sure? And I'm going to say, nope, I don't know that for sure. And he says, can we afford to be so cavalier about it, or do we have to treat it like it's a very serious situation to move on? So,
plus, you yourself just said it doesn't take that many people to
doesn't take that many people. Yeah, I just don't.
Do you
what I
remember
don't
the
want
DC
to
sniper, Scott? I think that was what
Say
he
again?
Do you remember the DC sniper? It was maybe 10, 20, probably 20 years ago.
Yeah. The guy shooting at the trunk of the car.
Yeah, one guy, and they closed down the schools in about. Well, somebody was riding with him, but he wasn't. He was just riding with him. But anyway, just based on that guy shooting, they closed down like a third of the schools in the country.
Right. I guess my thing is, if you start talking Hamas, and that's it's the buzz phrase. Hamas is coming across the border. What that does is put the entire Palestinian American community at risk, because it now, we start to have the FBI doing illegal surveillance. We have we have NYPD doing illegal surveillance, and constitutional rights are violated. The whole Beltway sniper. Yeah. So that's my point. Is I don't want to breathe fan the flames of intolerance. I don't want the Palestinian American community to suddenly be placed under great suspicion because of a hyped up story. But on the other hand, all it takes is one or two, and you got a problem. So I just think there's a way that we can secure the southern border without hyping up the Hamas, without buzz phrases. I'm somebody who likes to do away with the buzz phrases and deal with the facts. But you can't. Buzz phrases get you the money, because now we get into border security, and try to explain to Congress, the reality of the situation. Or if you come in and go, Hamas is coming across the border, we need money. Well, hell yeah, you're going to get all the money you need. A resolution calling for a ceasefire in the Security Council that was prompted by a once-in-a-lifetime intervention by a Secretary General on behalf of the Palestinian people, and we vetoed it. And now what we're seeing is that this General Assembly of the United Nations is using a very rarely used provision, Article 377, basically because the Security Council has failed to do its job. The General Assembly is taking up this issue, and there may be a case where the General Assembly will authorize the use of force to terminate this conflict and to deliver aid. Now, it's non-binding, so just because the General Assembly votes in favor of it doesn't mean anybody's going to do anything. And the fact that doing something means going against the United States makes it unlikely. But what I'm trying to say is that we are in uncharted territory here, where America truly is the bad guy in the world, and recognized as such because of what we are doing with Israel. Israel is responsible for destroying whatever was left of America's honor, and integrity. We are now linked with Israel in terms of implementing policies that are, by definition, war crimes.
How culpable is the Biden administration for war crimes? And on the one hand, Joe Biden claiming, and John Kirby, a spokesperson, will play the clip for you in a minute, claiming nobody's doing more to alleviate the suffering of the people in Gaza, which is ridiculous. Nobody's doing more to facilitate the demise of the people in Gaza except the United States government. Who believes what Joe Biden and Tony Blinken and Admiral Kirby say?
Not even Joe Biden, Tony Blinken, and Admiral Kirby. That's how bad it is. They know they're lying. And how do we know they know they're lying? Because we know what they're saying behind the scenes to Israel. They'll come out and they'll articulate publicly in support of Israel, although it's very difficult for them to do with a straight face. But we know what they're telling the Netanyahu government behind the scenes, which is you have to stop this. We can't support this. And in fact, now the United States is beginning to say Netanyahu's got to go. So we don't even believe our own lies. That's how bad this is.
But Joe Biden could stop this with a phone call. No more spare parts, no more ammunition. Stopped as of today, baby.
Right now. It would stop within an hour. Joe Biden could literally pick up the phone and say, hey, Bibi, when I hang up, the following will happen. You're going to announce a unilateral ceasefire, followed by a phased withdrawal of your troops from Gaza. I will work with the international community to pick up the slack. Don't worry, you don't have a say in what's going to happen, so I'm not even going to ask you. But you're going to stop doing this. And not only that, we're putting a freeze on all the spare parts to your aircraft and everything, and it'll be conditional. The unfreezing will be conditional upon your continued subservience to American foreign policy objectives now, because we're sick and tired of playing your stupid games. And Bibi would have no choice but to say, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir.
I want you to take a look at the statement made by the deputy U.S. ambassador to the United Nations when he cast that veto at the Security Council. It's relatively brief. Then I want you to see the statements made by 3 Arab diplomats in response.
Although the United States strongly supports a durable peace in which both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security, we do not support this resolution's call for an unsustainable ceasefire that will only plant the seeds for the next war.
We believe there is a moral obligation toward the international community to stop the killing of the Palestinian civilians. And it's the first time, at least in my lifetime, that I have seen that calling for a ceasefire became a controversial issue.
I'm not sure how deep is the understanding here of what's happening on the ground in Gaza. I mean, this war has broken every record. Largest number of journalists killed, largest number of hospitals destroyed, largest number of medics killed, largest number of UN employees killed.
Our message has been very clear. There needs to be an immediate ceasefire, there needs to be a cessation of hostilities, and we need to have immediate access for humanitarian aid. It is not acceptable.
One side is pig-headed, and the other side is rational.
And the pig-headed side wears the red, white, and blue of the United States of America. And I'm ashamed of my government. I'm ashamed of the stance taken by my government, because it flies in the face of everything that I was raised to believe America stood for. But it's also just, it's fundamentally unsound policy. Look, Israel has set an impossible bar in the Gaza. They've said that they will destroy Hamas militarily and politically, eliminate them. That isn't going to happen. Israel will never achieve this. And so by supporting Israel, we're supporting a policy that can't be implemented, which means we are setting ourselves up for failure. We should be working with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan on how to get Hamas to the table. How can we get Hamas to moderate its position so that it can become a negotiating partner? Because Hamas has won this war. As we're speaking, Hamas has fought the IDF to a standstill in most areas in Gaza. The Israelis are forced to retreat from certain areas, and Israel is now looking at shifting their tactics because what they're doing is unsustainable. Israel has lost. You won't know that by looking at mainstream TV, etc. But the bottom line is they're not winning this fight, and Hezbollah's there's a real danger of Hezbollah joining this fight from the north. And if they do that, Israel's going to lose northern Israel. They'll lose the Galilee. Hezbollah will occupy this. And now we're in the situation where Israel will feel an existential threat, and they may use nuclear weapons. And where are we in all this? Trapped in a trap of our own construct.
How bad have the IDF casualties been, which the Netanyahu government is trying to shield? Do you have any word on that?
Well, remember, there's certain units that are classified units, and so they may hide their casualties more effectively than others. Generally speaking, because of Jewish law, a body has to be buried a certain period of time after it dies, I think within 24 hours. And so the Israelis will be open about the vast majority of their dead. What they're not talking about are the wounded. There's a horrific number of severely wounded Israeli soldiers, by some numbers up to 5,000 and growing. And of these, over 2,000 are permanently disabled. So while the number of dead Israelis isn't, it's very high for Israeli standards. Right now, over 100 of their soldiers have died in Gaza. But the number of wounded and crippled and permanently disabled soldiers is in the thousands. This is an unsustainable number for Israel.
How unsustainable are stunts pulled by the IDF, like kidnapping Gazan young men, stripping them down to their underwear, parading them through the streets and pretending that they're captured Hamas, when we know that Hamas doesn't surrender?
Look, a lot of what the IDF is doing is playing to a domestic audience. They were humiliated on October 7th. They're facing humiliation today. So they're pulling off these stupid PR stunts to generate literal clicks on Israeli social media. This is the definition of stupidity and lunacy. What they did with those Palestinian men was a war crime, a literal war crime. It's unforgivable. But again, America, instead of calling them out and saying, what the heck are you up to? We're silent. We're saying no ceasefire continues. They're blowing up schools. They're blowing up mosques. They're going into the homes of Palestinians, into the women's bedrooms and pulling out their lingerie and mocking them. They're going into schools and putting down the most coarse graffiti. They're animals, pure animals. This is the kind of stuff that we would expect Nazi Germans to do. And it's being done by the IDF, a nation born out of the memory of the Holocaust. It's shameful. And what's even more shameful is that America is being silent in the face of, this flagrant disregard for norms, values that we espouse.
Here's Admiral Kirby on aid to Gaza, defending the United States because of no country in the world, according to Admiral Kirby, has done more to aid Gaza. I think you're going to change the verb in there after you listen to him.
Look, we certainly share the concerns that so many of others have concerned, including the Secretary General, about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Name me one more nation, any other nation, that's doing as much as the United States to alleviate the pain and suffering of the people of Gaza. You can't. You just can't. The United States, through President Biden, is leading the effort to get trucks, food, water, medicine, and fuel into the people of Gaza. Wait. Name another nation that's doing more than the United States to get hostages out or to get foreign nationals out of Gaza. You can't do it. And name another nation that is doing more to urge our Israeli counterparts, to be as cautious and deliberate as they can be in the prosecution of their military operations. You can't.
I mean, this is delusional. Name another nation that has facilitated more death in Gaza than the United States. You can't.
Yeah, look, John Kirby, let me give you an answer. More for aid? This is easy, John. Egypt, Turkey, Jordan, right there. bam, 3 nations have done far more than the United States to provide humanitarian support. Release of hostages, you haven't done a damn thing. It's Qatar that's done it. It's Egypt that's done it. It's Turkey that's doing it behind the scenes, not the United States of America. And to urge caution, you sent a 3-star general over to greenlight the Israeli battle plan. And he came back and the Israelis went in. You continue to provide ammunition. They're bombing the hell out of these people with the bombs we provided. They're running short of bombs, so we send them more bombs. So please don't tell me that you're doing everything possible. John Kirby, you're a war criminal. You are literally a lying sack of manure. I mean, God, I know we're on TV and I'm supposed to be a peaceful man, but John, you and I will rendezvous in Dark Alley someday, and it ain't going to turn out well for you. As I explained to you in Morse code, why everything you say is a lie, and you know it's a lie. I mean, he knows
your anger is justified. It's normal. It's human. This is our government for which you worked in dangerous situations for many years, and this is what it's turned into. Wasn't the purpose of World War II to prevent genocide, to stop genocide, and now we're facilitating it? Chris, run the other Kirby on. They try and get them to answer about the fake captives.
Just very quickly, there's disturbing images from Gaza, in northern Gaza, of people being arrested by the Israeli army, blindfolded, stripped naked. Some of them are journalists that we identified, and some are civilians. The Israelis saying they're Hamas fighters, regardless who they are. Do you think that Israel is still acting within the international law in its treatment of prisoners?
As I said, I'm not going to respond to every event on the ground and every occurrence. I haven't seen those images. It would be imprudent for me to comment on that. We don't, just as a general statement, we don't support any targeting of journalists one way or another, anywhere in the world. They have a right and a responsibility to be there reporting on this. We believe that they should be allowed to do their jobs, and we certainly don't, would never condone any inhumane or violation of law treatment of any innocent civilian. But I can't speak to those specific reports.
We know damn well he has seen those images.
Everybody saw those images. He's a liar. And John, please get off your high horse. The United States bombed Al Jazeera's offices in Baghdad in the 2003 war. You may not remember it, John. I do. We have targeted journalists as long as the journalists have been around who say things that we don't approve of. Now, we don't admit to it. But we do it. I mean, so to sit there and blatantly lie about the murder of journalists that's taking place, John, you know that the Israelis are targeting the pro-Palestinian Arab journalists in Gaza because Israel is losing the international public relations campaign. And one of the reasons why they're losing this campaign is that these journalists are doing yeoman's work in getting the truth out of Gaza to the world to see. So what does Israel do? Slaughter the journalists, kill them to try and shut them up. And you know they're doing it, John. You know they're doing it, and you're a liar. You saw the pictures. You know about the pictures. You're the damn press spokesperson. I can guarantee you the moment those pictures appeared on TV, they appeared across your desk with a big thing, what do we say about it? And you know what your solution was, John? To lie, because you're a liar.
Over the weekend, the Secretary of State of the United States signed a statement under oath invoking emergency powers in behalf of the president, bypassing the Congress to send $100 million worth of shells and ammunition and small arms rounds to Israel. In order to do that, under the statute, he had to swear, again under oath, that this was a true emergency, a threat to the national security of the United States. Now, Scott, how can they do this to us with a straight face? How can they even make an argument that bypassing Congress to send $100 million in explosive materials enhances the national security of the United States?
They can't. They can't. But the problem is Congress is bought and paid for by Israel. Israel's going to spend $100 million in the upcoming election. When I say Israel, I mean AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee that claims to be purely an American institution. But, you know, in the past, their employees have been caught spying on behalf of Israel. We know there's the money. Show me the money. There it is. Israel owns the American Congress. This is why the American Congress will not hold the president accountable for violating the rule of law, for violating the Constitution, for violating the laws of the land in supporting Israel. This is ridiculous. Look, Israel getting beat is not by Hamas in Gaza is not a national security threat to the United States of America. It may be a problem for Israel, but Israel ain't America. That's the one thing people have to start understanding. There is no American-Israel joint at the hip. They don't like us. Friends don't buy the loyalty of friends. Okay, that's what's happening here. They're buying elections to get Congress to do their bidding. Man, if Israel was everything they claimed to be, you wouldn't have to buy Congress. We would just naturally inclined to support our Israeli friends. But no, they have to be bought. Why? Because Israel has attacked the USS Liberty, slaughtering American sailors in 1967. Israel threatened American Marines in 1982. Israel has spied upon the United States, Jonathan Pollard. Israel has put listening devices near the White House to spy on the cell phone communications of Barack Obama and Donald Trump, and they're probably doing it against Joe Biden today. Israel is not our friend. Israel is using the United States for its own purposes, and its own purposes run counter to everything we stand for as a nation. Equality, individual freedoms. No, Israel's all about Jewish people, Jewish Israelis, the Zionists. They're not about Palestinians. They're not about Egyptians, Syrians. They're not about Americans. Unless you have a dual citizenship, unless you have dual passport, they don't care about you. They only care about themselves. This is okay. Nations are supposed to look out for their own interests. But America, please wake up. Israel is not our friend. In fact, in many ways, Israel is our enemy. And in many ways, they're our worst enemy because we have been lulled into believing they're our friends and they're getting away with literal murder.
While we speak, the United Nations Security Council just voted on a resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. 153 in favor, 10 against, 23 abstained. I don't have the list of the against or the abstained, but it does tell you about the consensus in the international community. Of what value to the United States, other than domestic American politics, is the relationship between the U.S. and Israel?
There was a time in the Cold War when one could articulate that sound relations with Israel was beneficial because the Soviet Union had made inroads in large numbers of Arab nations, Egypt, Iraq, etc. And having Israel as a bulwark against that as sort of an American aircraft carrier, so to speak, in the Mediterranean was of value. But as the Cold War ended, that geopolitical posturing ceased to exist, and that's about the time that Israel made a decision that they needed to change their approach to the United States, rather than trying to sell themselves as an asset that would naturally attract American support. Israel started selling themselves as an extension of America, buying our loyalty by buying our Congress. Israel provides nothing to the United States. It costs us money, and right now it's destroying our reputation even worse than we already have around the world. We are more isolated today than we have been at any time in modern history.
Are you of the view that domestic political forces will expel President Netanyahu from office, or are you of the view that the IDF will continue its monstrosities in Gaza and other forces like Hezbollah will enter the fray?
Well, first of all, I think that Israel's scared to death of Hezbollah entering the fray because they know that they can't beat Hezbollah, and they definitely can't beat Hezbollah without American assistance. And if Israel continues to push for a conflict that we don't want to fight, the level of American assistance may be negligible at best. I think that Netanyahu's days on this earth are limited. He has less than 4% approval rating in Israel. He's lost the trust of the Israeli people, and right now he's become an impediment to the political fortunes of Joe Biden. Remember, Joe Biden is an American president, but he's also an American politician who's seeking re-election come November of 2024. And right now, Israel is sinking his ship. I mean, Ukraine has punched a big hole in his ship, but Israel's sinking his ship. And so I think you're going to see Joe Biden go into damage control mode. And the first thing that's going to happen is that Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing government are going to be jettisoned. And then the next question is, who's going to take over, and what are we going to have to do with them to bring an end to this conflict? Because again, I'll just remind everybody, Hamas can't be beat. They've already won. And it's just a question of how many more innocent Palestinians are going to die before Israel, the United States, recognize the inevitability of this Hamas victory.
Before we go, I want to switch gears to Ukraine. Here's two clips. Here's Joe Biden in July of this year, just 5 months ago. And then again, Joe Biden last week saying essentially the opposite.
The issue of whether or not this is going to keep Putin from continuing to fight, the answer is Putin's already lost the war. Putin has a real problem. How does he move from here? What does he do? And so the idea that there's going to be what vehicle is used, he could end the war tomorrow. He could just say, I'm out. But what agreement is ultimately reached depends upon Putin. Extreme Republicans are playing chicken with our national security, holding Ukraine's funding hostage to their extreme partisan border policies. If Putin takes Ukraine, he won't stop there. It's important to see the long run here. He's going to keep going. He's made that pretty clear. If Putin attacks a NATO ally, then we'll have something that we don't seek and that we don't have today. American troops fighting Russian troops. American troops fighting Russian troops if he moves into other parts of NATO.
Which is it, Joe? Has Putin lost, or is he about to, quote, take Ukraine? But this is really absurd from the mouth of an American president, Scott.
Well, it just shows that when he speaks, he speaks with a superficiality that is defined more by domestic American politics than reality on the ground. You and I know when you played that clip originally, we critiqued it and just said how can he say that Putin's losing? Putin was winning. Well, now Putin's won. I mean, there's still fighting left to be done, but the Ukrainians are out of money at the end of this month. Congress has made it clear they ain't getting any more money. Ukraine's going to start eating itself. It's like a starving body. It's going to start feeding upon itself. The Ukrainian military has already made a decision that they're going to have to withdraw to more defensible positions, but they don't have anything left to defend. Russia, on the other hand, has hundreds of thousands of troops yet to be committed to this battle. This war is over. It's a humiliating defeat. But the good news is that Russia has no intention whatsoever of moving into Poland or the Baltics, etc. This is totally a false construct made by, there's the president of Russia putting the hat on the...
It's in the West Bank, and the cap of one of the honor guards falls off, and the president himself picks it up and puts it on the fellow's head.
Yeah, I feel sorry for that guy later on in the barracks, because he's going to be harassed for that, as any soldier would be for losing control of their cover. But the fact is, Russia is not going to invade Poland. So the president put forward, the good news is all this fear about Americans fighting Russians is predicated on Russia going into NATO, Article 5 being triggered. That just isn't going to happen. And so once again, this is the president lying to the American people about issues of national security and national fiscal policy. $60 billion he wants. I'm not a big fan of Mike Johnson, but he said something today when he spoke about it. He said, before we give Ukraine $60 billion, we need to, A, have accountability. We need, an inspector general in place. And B, we need a plan. You need to tell us, okay, we give you $60 billion. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to win? He said, Ukraine doesn't have a plan. The Biden administration doesn't have a plan, and they don't. It's simply pouring, good money after bad. And thank goodness we have somebody in the U.S. Congress is finally saying, time out. This isn't going to happen.
All right, time out for us. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for your